Hey guys, welcome back. I hope everybody had an awesome spring break. I hope you're rested up and I hope you're ready to finish the Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe unit. For today, guys, we are going to be covering slides 21 through 28. So if you could go ahead and get out your PowerPoint for the Jefferson, Madison, Monroe unit, and also get out your fill in the blank notes if you haven't completed them already. And yet again, we're going to cover slides 21 through 28. All right, so as we open up slide 21 here, it should come up with the title, Madison's Presidency. And so we are literally picking up right where we left off before spring break. We talked about Jefferson and the Barbary Pirates and America's first foreign war and our victory against those Barbary pirates to secure American trade. With that, Jefferson is going to exit after 2 terms as president. He's going to go like Washington and he's going to step down. And so after that, we have open elections. With that open elections, America will stick with the Democratic Republicans, and they will elect Jefferson's good buddy out of Virginia, James Madison, as president. Now, Madison's presidency, as we'll see once we click here, will not be as peaceful as Jefferson's. Madison was prepared for the position. So go ahead and click it. It should bring up a box here that says Madison was prepared for the position by serving as Jefferson's Secretary of State. So he is an experienced politician, Madison. He was one of the main writers of the Federalist Papers and the Constitution and many other government documents, and he is experienced within the American system. But as we click yet again, go ahead and click, you'll see the next box come up, and it is going to say, unfortunately, his 2 terms in office was dominated by America's first true foreign conflict besides the Barbary State Wars, which is going to be the War of 1812. And this will be a major conflict, as we'll see, that'll dominate Madison's presidency. So Jefferson's secretary, what you're going to fill in on that slide, guys, is 2 words there. First is going to be state. Secretary of State is the one that you're filling in. Second blank for that slide is going to be dominated by War of 1812. So you're filling in War of 1812. All right, let's go ahead and click, and let's move on to slide 22. So, ultimately, America up until this point has been really trying to avoid foreign conflict. We've really been trying to sit out of a lot of the issues that were going on in America, or excuse me, not in America, worldwide. Remember the conflict with England and France. We've tried to stay neutral. But as we see, go ahead and click, and you see on the slide here, you have 2 different boxes. First one says, British impressment of U.S. merchants and U.S. ships is going to continue. So even after the end of the conflict with America, France, and all that stuff, and in England, and the Barbary Pirate War, America is still having the major issue of Britain and France interfering with American trade and taking over American ships. So that has continued, which increases our tension with Europe. But so actually you're going to fill in on that slide, guys. Continued is the word you're filling in. That's the slide there. But as we see down in the green box at the bottom, it says, but an event in the West is going to convince Madison it was time for war. So although the British and the French continue to attack American boats, really it's going to be an event that happens out, and I believe in Indiana, that is actually going to convince Madison that it is now time to take action against Europe. So you first are going to fill in where it says West. West is what you're filling in out of that green box. And actually you can go ahead and pause me and play that hyperlink on where it says West. That should bring you to a YouTube that'll explain the event that we're going to cover next. All right, so go ahead and watch it. I'll see you when you get back. All right, welcome back. If you go ahead and click, it is going to bring us to what you just watched that little video on, which is going to be the Battle of Tippecanoe. All right, and so ultimately, with the Battle of Tippecanoe, we have an issue going on out in the new American territory of Indiana. Now, a gentleman named William Henry Harrison is going to be appointed governor of Indiana. Indiana Territory in that green box. So William Henry Harrison's what we're filling in there. He's appointed governor of the Indiana Territory. So we're filling in Indiana. Ultimately, Governor William Henry Harrison has a goal when he becomes the governor of Indiana. He wants to clear more room for American settlers. We're filling in settlers in our notes. To make Indiana a state. He knows he needs a minimum of 65,000 residents to become a full state and get statehood. So he wants to encourage more white people to move there. And so he needs to make room for those white people. The white people were nervous about moving to Indiana with Native American attacks and so on and so forth. And so he knew of United Shawnee Force throughout the region. Shawnee is the second thing we're filling in there. So we're filling in settlers, then Shawnee. And so really he has this issue. He has the Shawnee Nation that's on this land. He needs to clear that land in order to make room for these settlers coming in. If any of you guys are fans of Parks and Rec, the show Parks and Rec, Shawnee, which is where they live in that show, this is where that battle's taking place. This is the part of the country where that whole little show takes place. But anyway, if we look in the box in the upper right, our last box here, he also knew Shawnee Chief Tecumseh, which is what we're filling in there, Tecumseh, was traveling to the south trying to recruit other native tribes to join him in stopping this American expansion. You're also filling in expansion. So Tecumseh becomes basically a leader of these consolidated tribes, and his goal is to try to block this expansion that William Henry Harrison is going through. Hint, hint, conflict is coming. All right, so let's go ahead and click. It should bring up our next slide here. All right. With that, you click it up and it says, William Henry Harrison launches an offensive along the Tippecanoe Creek in Prophetstown. All right, named after Tecumseh's brother, the prophet, for his religious visions. So we are filling in Prophetstown there. After the American victory, this is really the big thing. Americans find in the grasp of these Native Americans that they just defeated and pushed out of the Indian Territory, British-made guns. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is. This is a violation of the treaty that ends the Revolutionary War. Remember, the British said they would not interfere in American territory. And essentially, by trading with these Native American groups that are located in American territory, the British were essentially breaking the treaty, and they were helping the enemies of the American state. So in that red box, you're going to fill in British made. But this is huge, guys. Those British made guns were evidence that the British were breaking the treaty and that they were helping American enemies. And so if we click yet again, it should bring up a box on the bottom. It says, encouraging the natives to fight the U.S. and impressing our merchants causes Madison to declare war. Essentially, guys, that is the camel that breaks the straw that breaks the camel's back. Between British seizing American boats and taking on American sailors, now you have the British openly trading with our enemies, which were the Shawnee Indians, and basically trying to get the Native Americans to rebel against American traders. Madison says, I have enough. We are now going to war. We are going to go to war with the British. And so we click on the next box. It brings up the War of 1812 was fought all across the United States in the East, the West, and the South. So go ahead and click, or you're going to fill in where it says War of 1812. All right, and then that is actually a hyperlink as well. If you want to pause me, you can go ahead and do so. You can watch the little link on the War of 1812. All right, so go ahead and watch. Enjoy. I'll see you when you get back. All right, welcome back. As we were talking about the War of 1812 here and the different locations in which the war takes place, we can go ahead and click, and it's going to bring up in the East. So in the eastern part of the United States, places like New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, those type of areas. Essentially, we see several different battles that take place. Essentially, America trying to flood across the Canadian border and take control of some major Canadian towns, which were British at the time. But we also see the British flood across our border and start attacking major cities and going after, namely, the capital. And so, as we see here, the British actually will storm into the city of Washington, D.C., essentially undefended. They will destroy the American Capitol, and they will burn the White House. Actually, interesting story you'll see next week with Dolly Madison, James Madison's wife, will actually save a lot of different treasures from the White House, like a portrait of George Washington before it could be destroyed. Saved a lot of American history, which is pretty awesome. But anyway, over on the right, it says the British invade and set fire to the White House. You're filling in the White House, and they will conquer the city of Washington, D.C. James Madison will actually personally try to lead troops in the defense of the city, but it will be to no avail. He'll have to basically hightail it out of the city like most Americans, and Washington, D.C. will actually fall to the British. Shortly afterwards, the British will then set their sights on Baltimore, which is a major trading city right to, I guess it would be to the west of Washington, D.C. Anyway, the 3-day battle takes place, major battle between British ships and an American fort in Baltimore Harbor. The Americans will actually miraculously defend the city from the British conquering it, and will actually stop the British advance in the east. This major victory actually becomes the inspiration for Francis Scott Keyes to write the Star-Spangled Banner. You know, the rocket's red glare, bombs burst in the air, that whole deal. Anyway, Francis Scott Keyes, so you're going to fill in Scott Key, writes the defense of Fort McHenry. McHenry, as he watches the Baltimore Harbor. McHenry is what you're filling in there. In 1889, the poem was renamed the Star-Spangled Banner. So you're going to fill in the Star-Spangled Banner there. All right? Anyway, so that's the major battles that take place, the War of 1812 in the East. Yet again, conquering Washington, D.C., and then the defense of Baltimore by the Americans. The Americans will actually go across the Canadian border and burn Toronto, which was a major Canadian city, to the ground. So you actually see damage on both sides. If you didn't fill it in, make sure you fill in Star-Spangled Banner there. All right, let's go ahead and click on to the next. I believe it's going to bring us to the west. So now in the western, out by the Mississippi River, we're also going to see conflict. Essentially, the British are going to try to control the Great Lakes, which were a major trading port for the United States. But the American Navy will actually come to the defense of these Great Lakes. So you have, if you click it, you have Oliver Hazard Perry. Perry is what we're filling in. Becomes a national hero after his Battle of Lake Erie, where we have one of the first American naval battles in history, where actually American boats will defeat British boats out in the Great Lakes. And it sounds weird to hear a naval battle in the Great Lakes, but you have to understand, guys, if you've never been, the Great Lakes are like an ocean. They literally have waves, is how large they are. All right, and so they're fighting these naval battles out in the middle of the Great Lakes. And so you're filling in the Battle of Lake Erie. Why this is significant? It gives the United States control of the Great Lakes. We basically use the Great Lakes for trade throughout this time period, and that secures American trade so that boats can continue to sail and bring supplies to different ports. Go ahead and click it. Also, guys, the U.S. wins at the Battle of the Thames. So you go ahead and underline or fill in the Thames. The Indian Alliance is broken after Tecumseh is killed. So basically, the Native Americans that we beat in Indiana under William Henry Harrison at the Battle of Tippecanoe, they are going to join forces with the British. Basically, the British promised them land if they helped them out. But the Americans will defeat them at the Battle of Thames. So you're filling in Thames. And the Indian Alliance is broken. You're filling in broken. So that Indian rebellion basically crumbles after this defeat, and so the British are no longer going to be able to get help from those Native Americans. Obviously very important for the American forces to have less people to fight. So let's go ahead and click it. It should bring us to the south, which is the last region we're going to talk about. And so Andrew Jackson, a dude we will talk about a lot as we move forward. He ends up being president, one of my personal favorite presidents because he's crazy. I mean, literally insane. We'll talk more about that later on. So anyway, you click on it, brings up Andrew Jackson. You're filling in Jackson, becomes a national hero after his victory of the Battle of New Orleans. You're filling in New Orleans. So New Orleans is the port city of the Mississippi River. Every piece of trade in America, not every piece, but most pieces, were flowing down that Mississippi River. And if they wanted to get out to the ocean, they had to pass through New Orleans. So the British knew that that city was a major key to victory. If they could shut down New Orleans, they could shut down American trade. And so the British will actually send a force to try to capture the city. Andrew Jackson is going to essentially lead a ragtag army of regular civilians, militia, and army individuals and defeat a much larger British force as they try to take the city of New Orleans. Obviously protecting the city, which was huge for American aims. The interesting part, though, as we read here on the bottom, however, the whole battle itself is unnecessary because the war itself had actually ended 2 weeks earlier. The Americans and the British had basically decided that the war had become a stalemate, and they basically negotiated a treaty where the British would go to their side of the Canadian border and America would stay on our side of the border. And so although the Battle of New Orleans is this huge major victory, it doesn't actually happen during the frame of the war. It happens outside of it because information had not reached all the way to New Orleans that a peace treaty had been signed. And so it's a significant victory, but kind of an unnecessary one. Anyway, with the ending of the war, if we click on it, it should bring up a blue box. That blue box says the Treaty of Ghent. Ghent is what we're filling in there, was signed in Ghent, Belgium to end the War of 1812 in this stalemate. So if we go ahead and click, it should bring us to our last slide, slide 28 that we're going to cover today, and it says outcomes. So what are the outcomes of this kind of War 1812 that takes place between America and Britain? Click it one more time. U.S. victory in this, they call it a victory. It's really more of a stalemate, if you will. But U.S. victory spreads nationalism. So nationalism is what we're filling in our notes. And nationalism is basically extreme patriotism, pride in your country. So how do you see nationalism in the painting behind? Well, pretty simple. You got James Madison bloodying up the nose of the king and kind of standing up to that giant tyrant. He has a black eye. He's got a bloody nose. He's strong. And so basically it says another bloody nose for John Bull, basically saying America had 2 victories over the British, which was highly unlikely. Other outcomes, U.S. industry grows. Because Britain had blockaded trade during this time period, it actually forced America to increase our own industrial output. So we read the red box in the bottom right. Britain blockaded is what we're filling in, the U.S. coast during the war. The Americans begin to make their own products instead of importing them. And so they used to imports what you're filling in there. Essentially, it's very simple. British block American trade forces Americans to make their own products, which only made our economy much stronger. Last thing here, go ahead and click on it. It says moving west becomes easier. Essentially, no more Indian alliance means that we could easily expand westward and didn't have to fight battles as we went. So we're going ahead and fill in no more Indians what we're filling in there. All right, and so ultimately, guys, that was slide 28, and that covers our notes for today. The rest of the week, you're going to be doing activities on the War of 1812. Hope to see you guys soon. Take care of yourselves, and Mr. C out. Peace. See you later.